All right, we're live. I believe so. And again, I'll get my Instagram going and I'll get this show on the road. As soon as I hit go live on my Instagram, it always takes a little time. There we are. We're Instagram live. All right, let's get started. Censorship. Today I'm talking about censorship, banning books, the Hays Code. What does it mean? I'll tell a little story today about kind of how I walked into this and why this is a topic that's interesting to me. And we're going to learn something new, probably, I hope. But before I get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about kind of process and some of the things that I'm hearing about, yada, yada. Okay. So, first of all, I do realize that people really don't watch this. So the video is less important, but I keep on trying to do little things to enhance it. I get it. People are listening to it. So when the sound's off, it really sucks. I get it. I'm working on that. Hopefully today's a good sound day. I didn't even do a sound check because I'm confident it should be right. I made sure some of the things I checked were checked. The other thing that's happening is, look, I'm marketing, I'm self-promoting right now, and it's frustrating. I don't like doing it. It's blasting, it's yelling, it's screaming. It feels like spam. I get it. I wouldn't have to do all this stuff if you guys would just fucking comment on my shit. But the truth is, I joke, and I'm also serious that engagement is just kind of how I get more reach and how I grow my audience without paying money. If you guys want to throw me stars, I'll throw that right into marketing. I'm not looking to, I'll throw that right into, all right, if you give me a $10 of stars, I'll boost it and I can do less spamming. I mean, I'm trying to do this on a shoestring budget. So I want to apologize though, because I know that I'm kind of blasting out and it's like you're standing there and I'm like, nah. Yeah, I like Nate. I like what he's doing. I want to support him. God damn, man, you just all up in my shit. I understand that. I'm working on that. It's going to happen until I grow these things. Just follow all the accounts. Look, if I get to, if all my accounts are the same followers, that means everyone just kind of moves amongst them. I'm good. But like people aren't portable and I need people just to step off and step in. Anyway, I do apologize and I want to make sure that you understand. I'm aware that it's spamming and I'm going to be more on a schedule and I think that'll go away. The last but not least, After Hours is the thing that I'm growing. It's non-political. It's a place where I'm going to be asking questions like I'm 5 and learning about whatever that guest is on the show. It may be things, excuse me, I'll cut that in post. It may be things I agree with. It may be things I don't agree with, but that's the nature of that show. Please check it out. That's one of the reasons why I'm spamming the shit out of everything. So I'm trying to get After Hours to grow. So if you don't really like Nate's political stuff or you want to just see kind of where he's going with it, follow that. Less spam. Throw me stars. All this stuff is ways that you can help me grow and gain my reach. In the meantime, I understand if you have to mute. I'm going to try to make sure that I notify when the lives are. That's the most important piece of content I'm trying to put out there. This is my bread and butter, if you will. So again, I know it's spammy. I just want to just say, hang in there. Eventually, it's not like, I mean, it's either Trump or Nate, I guess. You can have Trump in your feed or Nate. I mean, choose Nate, okay? I'm joking. I'm not trying to compare myself with that, but I do understand it's, self-promotions, it's a thing on this social media. You got to just kind of yell and scream and or pay money to get kind of go outside. And I'm trying to do it cheap. So anyway, that's that. I wanted to put a bow on that before I get started. So let's get back to the topic and talk about that. So censorship, how I kind of rolled into this. I'm going to tell a little story, and the story is kind of how I came up with the topic. If you follow the show, I like to bounce around, and I kind of have a structure for how I keep these things on point. And I'm doing some things today, working, trying to earn my keep, trying to contribute to society. And I kind of took a break, went to my office where I do my research. As you know, it happens to be the same place I use the bathroom. I know too much information. Put your kids to bed. And I'm scrolling through and I've been doing all this promotion for After Hours, and I've been kind of promoting my first guest, which was a bunch of filmmakers, awesome, super talented. Go see it. Go see the movies, Cold, Transient. I plugged the shit out of it. You probably know about it already. If you don't, it's awesome. I went to the premiere. That's what I was doing Saturday night. Kind of felt cool going to a premiere with local movie people, and they do their stuff local, so they're just awesome folks. Went there, and so my feed now I was promoting them, and the feed starts to get movie stuff in it. So, I'm scrolling through TikTok, and as this little thing comes up with Quentin Tarantino in an interview, and he was talking about Alfred Hitchcock. And again, all those things are I like. I like Quentin Tarantino films, but I don't usually see film stuff in my feed. I see a lot of political stuff, mostly political stuff and tech stuff, to be honest with you. Now it's pretty much that's all it is. And so this feed comes in, and it's Quentin Tarantino talking about Alfred Hitchcock, and he's like, he's talking in his he's doing his Tarantino thing, and he's jumping all over the place. He's probably got ADHD too, and so he tells the host that he doesn't really think that Hitchcock was able to do whatever he was able to do because of the Hays Code. And I'm like, oh, ding ding, I don't know what the fuck the Hays Code is. He keeps on going. Then he kind of goes on, and he's a smart guy. You might not like his films. You might think he's, kind of crass or whatever. He throws the N-word around in films. He just lays it out there, puts his art out there. I love it. I fucking love Quentin Tarantino, by the way. Just love it. One of the crazy things about him, by the way, just a side note, in Reservoir Dogs, there's very little show of the violence, okay? If you watch that movie, it seems like a violent movie, but he does this trick where he shows kind of the off scenes or the output of it instead. Anyway, I kind of go deep. I can go deep on Reservoir Dogs. No shit. People that know me that era know that I watched that movie almost every day for like fucking months right before my almost probably. I don't know. Anyway, crazy. All right. So it's scrolling and this word pops up, Hays Code. I'm like, what's Hays Code? All right. What is Hays Code? And so he says it again. Then he goes, and the guy presses him a little bit. He's like, yeah, I mean, I like his stuff, but I felt like he held back because of the Hays Code. He goes, if Hitchcock would have been, been the same age in the 70s, he would have been fine. But I think he had to hold back because of Hays Code. So it sparked my interest. Like, what's this thing that he's talking about? So cavalier, like, oh, it's just this thing everyone knows about. I don't know about it. You're probably like, okay, Nate, you don't know about it. Fine. That's fair. I don't know everything, So I'm curious. I start looking it up, and it turns out that it is this code that Hollywood kind of came up with, the Movie Picture Association, which was the MPDAA at the time. And they came up with what they wanted to do, which was self-regulate themselves. And this is before we had the rated R, rated X, or whatever. So the reason it's named the Hays Code is because the head of the MPDAA, which then became the MPAA, he was named, I think, William Hays, possibly. Hayes was his last name, something Hayes. Okay. My notes, I did this research, quickly, yada, yada. I don't have researchers, but Mr. Hayes was basically kind of tasked with doing the self-regulation. And so what had led to this, which is interesting, is what led to all this craziness. You're like, all right, well, what's going on? So there were a couple scandals that had happened that made people question morality. And if you go back, there were different things that happened in film that kind of broke the mold. Crazy fun fact, Thomas Edison broke the mold with the depiction of a kiss on camera, and it was considered just radical, almost pornography, like crazy. And so that was kind of one of the first instances of something pushing the boundary of what's acceptable on film. Kept on going from there. I have a whole timeline of shit that happened. Let me just go through a couple things. It's kind of interesting, right? So hold on. And by the way, I'm going to draw a parallel. This isn't just the Hays Act is interesting, but it's in the past. There's an evolution to what we have today, the rating system. There's some interesting tidbits I'll go through. But what's more interesting is what I got from that Tarantino clip, which I'm going to wrap up at the end. You have to stay with me here. But that Tarantino clip kind of, in one instance, kind of came with this thought of what that meant when he described that. It's obvious if you just kind of play this back and say what Quentin Tarantino said, you know where I'm going with it. But let me walk through and tell you the rest of the story, okay? So Thomas Edison, what, in 1896, the film The Kiss, it faced backlash from the Catholic Church for depicting public kissing. The Catholic Church played a pivotal moment, by the way, in this kind of push towards the kind of censorship of these films. As you'll note, 1907, Chicago established the first movie censorship board, and other cities and states followed. So then there was this movie called The Birth of the Nation, which you probably heard of, which was crazy, but it was heavily protested and banned because it depicted the KKK and racial kind of the impropriety in a good light. And it was almost like they were the heroes. And so it became very controversial at the time. And so again, it wasn't even kind of pornography or sexual content. It was racial components that was pushing the envelope, going and going, kind of making these things like, all right, we have this new medium, right? Film is new. Thomas Edison around that time, right? I'm not sure. I didn't even look. I should have checked to see when film was made and created and all that stuff. But I think he probably had a hand in some shit, right? Don't think I'm stupid. I know the phonograph was his deal, but I don't know where he was with film. Sorry. But he did make The Kiss, so maybe he was the guy that invented film. Fuck, I should have a researcher. See, give me stars. I'll pay for that shit. But anyway, it's a good fact. It kind of breaks a little bit in my head. But anyway, so he actually was one of those first people to push the envelope. Birth of a Nation, formation of the Motion Picture Association, and Distributors of America. So it was the MPDA. And that eventually led to the Hays Code. And what this dude Hays was, he was a Republican, and he was basically put into that place because of his ability to navigate the industry as well as plot. So he was essentially like the first lobbyist, kind of the plant that was like, all right, I'm going to get the things that they want. And he came up with this self-regulation, all these mechanisms. So it was a set of like moral guidelines that filmmakers had to follow. And it was adopted by the major studios. And it wasn't like X like that. That was later. 1952 Supreme Court miracle decision in Joseph Burstein versus Wilson granted the First Amendment protection for films. So it's starting to crack down that people are like, hey, we want to push this. We want to push the envelope. Then all of a sudden they revised the code. Again, we're leading to, I think it was 1930 to 1968 is when they finally replaced the Hays Code with GMRX. Now, that was 1968. So if you go back to my clip about Quentin Tarantino, my point is that, he's saying, well, if Hitchcock would have, made those films in the 70s, he would have been, he wouldn't have had to hold back, as he said, and I'm paraphrasing. So what I find interesting is after the 1968, the MPA replaced it. Then they came out in 1969. They came out with this. It was the GMR and X rating of films. Midnight Cowboy was an X-rated film, and it won the Academy Award for Best Picture. So right after, as soon as they released the Hays Code, and they said, we're not going to do that. We're just going to let people do what they want, and then we'll just rate it. And someone's like, all right, we're going to push the envelope. So they gave it the highest rating that came out was X, and bam, now all of a sudden you've got this Academy Award winning X-rated film right after the Hays Act. Now you could talk about the social pressures and how liberals tend to get all excited. They have new rules, so they're just going to stretch them. They're like, all right, I'm just saying, look, if you're a conservative, I have a little conservative in my blood. I understand, like, it's like let's legalize drugs. All right, everything. And I'm pro legalized drugs, but I feel like there is the wing of our party of the Democrats, and I'm a Democrat right now, is like they're always going to push this envelope of like free everything and everything. I get it, and I'm not hating. Okay, there's a lot there, but I'm just going to say this is one of those things where you kind of wonder, like, was there backlash of like, all right, look, we're so tired of being restricted and we're pushing the envelope. We can't show kisses, we can't show this, we do that. And of course, at the same time, I believe Star Trek was kind of in that era too. They were pushing the envelope with the first black kiss, I believe, was on Star Trek, I think, or maybe it was between Sidney Poitier and somebody else on film. But I'm not sure what the first kiss was. But these are things that push the envelope of censorship, and people are losing their fucking minds because a black person kissed a white person, or what is his name's? What's freaking William Shatner kissed the black woman on his show, and I should know her name. Yada yada. But so it wasn't just like people pushing sex stuff that was like pushing the envelope to kind of lead up to this point, as I understand it. Now, if you're a fucking historian and you're calling me out on this stuff, that's fine. I don't have a researcher, but the sequence of events and my contextual additions add for the excitement of the story for those folks that don't get to watch. They're just listening as they're falling asleep to my voice and slowly dreaming about the things that I'm saying, so that they want to do this every single night. Anyway, I don't want to hypnotize them. I don't want to put you asleep yet. But let me get to the exciting part. So 1969, Midnight Cowboy comes out. It's an X-rated film, gets Best Picture. Then, of course, bam, chicka, bam, bam. We all know the sound, the cliche sound. Maybe not all of us, but there's a cliche kind of bounce, chicka, bounce, in the 1970s, that bounce, chicka, bounce, that strong bass line popping off the bass line, hitting the fretboard, slapping on it, bounce, chicka, bounce. And that slapping sound was synonymous with the slapping sound that we was busting all skins, all that shit. So, of course, the porn era comes out of that. So the porn era starts, they were like, all right, we're going to come out. We're going to get rid of the Hays Code. And, of course, Hollywood goes nuts, gangbusters. And a lot of porn came out. Now, it wasn't all mainstream, of course, but an underground kind of like, all right, we can do whatever. And, of course, that's kind of where you can watch. What is it? What's the movie? With Marky Wahlberg. You can watch that movie. It kind of gives like a kind of a fictional tale, I would guess, but probably it's with some truth sprinkled in of the craziness of the film business, the underground film business, and pornography that came out of it. So people think of the pornography with the Hays Act, but there's, again, as I said before, it's not just the pornography. There was racial components, and a big, The Birth of a Nation was banned for the fact that it was pro-racial segregation and Ku Klux Klan and all that shit. So it's not just that Hollywood pushed the sexual envelope right after the Hays Act. I'm imagining that's probably when Roots and all the other films that started to come out that were able to talk about things that we weren't able to talk about because some of the things were uncomfortable on film. I mean, if you look at the history, it's interesting because it's just people's comfort level with talking about some of the things that were like, all right, we can't have sex or anything like that or any kind of racial thing because it has to be. But they did, how often they depicted like kind of Aunt Jemima kind of roles in that same time. So it was, as long as it was a deference to the old times with some kind of storyline of their main audience that they could relate, then it was okay, it seems. I'm making wild speculation, but I will say I did take a couple rock and roll history classes in college. I think I took first and second year. So we talked about some of those racial components that were happening in music as well. Elvis stealing shit, yada, yada. Anyway, so I'm just embellishing right now, but the storyline is still such that 1968, they go back to their own rating system. 1969, Best Picture, X-rated, Midnight Cowboy. Then after that, pornography explodes. And then now all of a sudden we have this stigma of X films being all pornography. And then they came XX, triple X. That was kind of a marketing term to say we're triple X, whatever. But the MPA was like, all right, look, X became, even though X won Midnight Cowboy, it's still, and it was a X-rated film that won Academy Award. That then became synonymous with pornography. So then they came out with NC-17 to try to give filmmakers some little loophole where they could do it. Now, if you go back to watch 80s movies of PG-13, there's actually nudity in PG-13 movies in the 80s, like, which is crazy, right? You don't think of that in this time. So that's a moving target. I'm kind of trying to explain that, like, this whole thing with the Hays Act and censorship, it's all kind of relative, and it all kind of, every single time they allowed people to do what they wanted, I'm going to make the case that creativity exploded. Now, you can also argue that it warranted certain elements of protection from certain, maybe more sensitive parts of the demographic, children, people that may have a predisposition for something. You could say for someone who had violence in their life, they may not be able to watch now violence or whatever, or or capture or bondage or something to that effect. They may have had something where these things now in a non-sexual movie that could be depicted in some kind of form could be now done. So one could argue, right? This is the argument for censorship that you kind of walk right into to say, well, do you just want the wild, wild west? Well, Hollywood kind of was like, all right, we're kind of stop. We're just going to let people do what they want. And then we're going to allow the artistic freedom. And there's a lot to be said with that. And I think going back to what Tarantino said was that he felt like Hitchcock wanted to go further, but he was held back in what he could do. And so creatively, he was stifled. This is where I land kind of on censorship, by the way. This is a large point of where I stand, and that is you have to allow for creative freedom. I look at what I'm doing right now as an art. I don't want someone to tell me I can't say this. I know I shouldn't say these words that are faux pas, but I still want to be able to use them and make word games and play funny tricks with them once in a while for comedic relief or whatever. Right? You know my favorite word's retard, and I love it, and I'm not going to say it, and I apologize to everyone I say it 10 times. I'll get some inbox nasty people. I know, I'm sorry. But we talk about it. Words are bad in some ways, and we associate them in our head, and I'll do a whole podcast on that. But what I think is interesting is that I look at this as art, and I don't want anyone to stifle me. I don't necessarily want your children. I would love for your children to listen to this because Look, I don't believe in the censorship of words to kids. I know that's fucked up. People don't agree with me. I don't have kids, so I'm not advocating this. But if you want to hear that one, I'll do a whole podcast on my theory. I just don't remember somebody I remember swear words forever. So I'm like, when did I learn them? Who cares? Anyway, so whatever. But I don't want to be. I understand filtering, right? And saying, hey, look, that's why I'm on at 10:30, trying to accommodate the folks that are, just too late and maybe it's hard for their ears or maybe they fall asleep to it, whatever. Late night seems to be a little bit of license, right? So I do that. And I know that people have asked me to do it earlier. I'm like, no, because I just don't know. I don't know. It's late. I don't want to be able to say things. So my point is that I personally, as someone who looks at art, really land on the point of well, I don't really like any censorship. And I don't. Now, I also do really strongly believe in the technical ability for parents to monitor their self. In fact, I'm actually disappointed that there isn't a straight up boom, hit a button and you can literally see what your kid's looking at on their phone. I mean, I don't know why there isn't that feature. Maybe there is. Maybe there's apps that do it. Maybe I'm not a parent. Maybe there is. Maybe there's parental. But if I had a kid, I would be like, listen, Apple, I know you can do this. I understand the security implications. Make it so that we have to do some double key entry to link the phones up. And it's a one-time cryptographic key that can never be reused. And we eat it afterwards. And then our phones are linked. And then once the child becomes 18, it automatically disengages, but it's engaged something. And then I have complete control over it. Now, I know you can't monitor everything, but I'm just saying that I go big brother if you're trying to protect your children, even as somebody who was gatekept from information and culture and everything else. To my parents' credit, it wasn't a bad thing. In their mind, they were trying to protect me from certain things. Maybe they wanted me to turn out like I did today with all these bad words and things I say. But the truth is, I'm okay with it. I didn't like it. I'm not saying it was fun. I don't like being told what I can and can't do. But as somebody living under their house, they can certainly have some control over what content I have. Or they can go the other route, which they could say, look, there's content out there. We don't care if you watch it. We'll watch it with you together. If it's some weird content, obviously it's not pornography, but I'm saying you can obviously have those conversations with your children. I'm imagining, and I'm not a parent. This is way off my place of expertise. I don't even have any domain logic about it other than brothers and sisters, nephews and nieces, and just being a great armchair quarterback dad. I will eventually have a podcast on how to raise children, I'm sure, because I will not need them to tell you how to fucking raise them. But anyway, if you listen to this podcast, know it's a joke, but I'll figure out the right way and I'll fucking tell you how to do it right. Anyway, so my art, your art, who says it's censored? Who says it's not art? Look, I want to do my podcast naked. There's a guy that takes his shirt off. I'm actually disgusted by it. I know, look, he's up here. If he ever encounters me, wildly successful, amazing. But I just, oh, he's got his shirt off. That's the joke. Can't watch. And to me, it was offensive, right? But the people, I mean, he's obviously successful. He's on Joe Rogan. He's doing great. But I was like, just. Now, and again, I would send, I mean, come on, dude, don't get up there. No, don't do that. It's just weird. And I'm not, there's no sexual weirdness with me seeing him without a shirt. It's just weird to me. It's not, I don't want to look at that the whole time. I'm just like, all right, I don't know. Okay. I don't know. I have to dig into why it bothered me so much. Whatever, dude. It's okay. He's successful. Right? My point is, it did bother me, but I'm like, I'm not making a campaign for him to stop what he's doing. I just turn him off and I try to avoid him. The other day when he was on Roast, he had clothes on. I was like, oh, there's that guy with a vest on. They even made a joke about it. Nikki Glazier, which was amazing. She killed it. So did the other dude. It was awesome. I still don't think it was the best roast ever. I stand by that. Anyway, all right. So, by the way, the roasts, they talk about what they can do on those roasts all the time. So we're at the Midnight Cowboy. We've got the pornography kind of flourishing. The MPA introduces the NC-17. And then the 1980s, actually another film that was interesting, The Last Temptation of Christ, I think was getting an NC-17 rating at some point, or maybe it did, because and I think the religious folks didn't like that because I think they also didn't like the depiction, I think, in the movie. Although I think the lead of that is now pretty heavily a Christian. And again, if you watch this show, I don't have any problems with any religions. I just don't subscribe. I kind of in the Ricky Gervais line of thinking, honestly, and it's not. I didn't get it from him. It's just kind of how I evolved it. I feel like that's so. I don't hate on it, but I just find it interesting that we've got this censorship that kind of spans race. It's got religious connotations in it, and then it's also got, obviously the obvious thing, which is the visceral, the looking at something, sexual content, whether it be sexual content or any kind of trauma on film could also be considered kind of something that violated it. But I want to make the larger point, which is what Quentin Tarantino was saying, which is like, was Hitchcock stifled? Is there a point? And, I mean, obviously we have this kind of explosion of kind of different creativity and different kind of artistic views of what could be on film that happened after they let that go. Now, you could argue that pornography has its negatives, and we can talk all day long about how that is a negative. We have a lot of things in society that are negatives. Gambling, smoking. We have all these things that can kill people and do things. And should we ban them all? I mean, there's an argument to do it. Now, where it becomes interesting with anything that's pornography is that it really can span from the whole spectrum, can be considered art to some person. Okay. And every single level of it at any point. And so that's where that becomes kind of more of a like, all right, do you want to be able to view that type of art of two consenting or whatever consenting people? That's where it becomes like it's not your choice, but you could argue that you should be able to easily avoid things like that. I don't think that we should, it should be okay to have commercials of it. But someone could argue that, hey, look, why not? Why can't you have those images on billboards? And we would all say it's all shocking to say, well, you can't. But is there an argument to say, well, why can't you? Why is there so much shame attached with the human body? I know you got the biblical version, but I'm saying, like, is it because of, you go to other countries and other places and there's no shame and breasts hanging out and so forth and so on. So is it something that we learn to be shamed about it? And maybe there's something to say that in a society that doesn't have any shame, then there is no pornography, because it's all just like, all right, cool. Those people are over there just doing it. And that's just, you guys, maybe cleanly, it wouldn't be cool to do it in there. And obviously, but I don't know. I'm totally going into that left wing, wacky, push the envelope of what would be, the opposite of what we think is acceptable today, in a world where we could do that. And again, I'm not saying that's where we go, but you can always kind of make an argument. And so that's where in court, you're going to lose on this pornography thing, because you can make an artistic argument. And I think that's what, I'm not sure how, what's the guy's name, from the guy that's paralyzed that ran Hustler. I know he had the same kind of similar suit. So all this is like whatever, right? It's not. It's like old school, Nate. Cool. We learned a little lesson. You threw in some pornography, got some clicks for that. Um, but I think more importantly is I think bringing it back to what Quentin Tarantino said, and also understanding the argument that people are going to take things to extreme and probably find ways to destroy anything. You do have an explosion of things that happen when they release the censorship and the kind of the artistic creativity was able to flow. And this bring it up today where you have folks that are saying, no, we can't talk about that, or we're banning that. We don't want to. So it makes no sense. And what I've also see as somebody that's been, I went to this movie premiere, I saw these creatives, and I'm kind of really loving this ability to create. I'm trying to play guitar again and trying to put myself out there in different ways and find ways of just kind of creating something, some lasting thing, right? Something I can be proud of looking at. And so now to suggest that now that you have this whole kind of generation that's getting told, hey, look, those things are off limits, or you can't read about them, or you can't write about them, or those things kind of go away, or that's too sensitive, when there might be some healing that can happen with learning about that stuff, as well as kind of, all right, we're going to learn about our history so we don't forget about it. And so, or even having discussions about topics that you might not approve of, but at some point, there's somebody in your life that needs to hear that this is not weird to think this way or do this. And so those things being normalized or at least discussed allow for people to explode in creativity, even if they're a little bit off kilter, what we might think is different, or they're living in some different world that we can't understand. They think of themselves as something, and we see them as something else, but we just can't understand it. But for them, knowing that there's other people that think like this is fucking life-changing. You look at The Matrix. I remember when those the two sisters wrote The Matrix before they had transitioned. I mean, I just to see that whole movie kind of explode, and of course I see the metaphor that they built into that thing completely, and they finally did their transition. So, I mean, for them, they actually kind of found a way to let their creative outlet kind of bring them to their point where they then found themselves. But I think that they were fortunate, and I don't think that happens for everybody. And so I think normalizing things and not saying, hey, look, just because I don't understand it, I don't want people to learn about it, doesn't make it easier for anybody to deal with it. It makes it weirder for everybody to deal with it, including yourself and your family. So I know you sit on boards, and I know I went to school with you, and I know you think you're doing good stuff by banning books in Hempfield. But I mean, it's literally like you're stifling a whole generation of folks from not only creative kind of outlets and learning about, and this isn't a lecture. This is fucking like, you can see the history of what happened, and you could argue, well, I don't want, if we look, you can argue, well, look at the pornography thing's out of the gate. Okay. That's gone. That's done. You can say whatever you want, but the point of banning things, even things that you are called pornography, is subjective. It means nothing to somebody who looks at it as art, especially someone that created it and looked at it from artistic view, whether or not they were trying to incite emotion or instigate orgasms for people. It was their art. I know that's not comfortable to talk about, and people get all weird about it, like, oh, you said it should be. And notice I threw in consenting adults doing what they want, and that's their thing. So film is a creative outlet. Books are a creative outlet. They tell stories. We read less and less books, unfortunately, and I'm a victim to it because we get our content so much. And so why are you banning these kind of treasures that have these stories that perhaps they were told one time in a way that's going to touch somebody a different way? And I'm not trying to be all poetic. I swear on my life. It just dawned on me when Quentin Tarantino said that, like, all those people that were kind of underneath that umbrella that wanted to do creative things. Maybe they saw in their mind some creative, wild things that they would have painted in their mind, but they felt stifled so they were just shut down out the gate because they're like, oh, this is too radical, so I must be weird because I'm thinking about, horror films or whatever, when that became a whole genre. And I'm kind of embellishing what that situation might be, but I can, as somebody who understands what it feels like to maybe kind of be held back in some way by my own, perhaps, but felt that kind of restraint and knowing that there's some kind of restraining thing that you can't do. And then when that comes off, I think that allows people to kind of find themselves. And so I truly, truly fucking believe that banning books is kind of killing people. It's killing people's ability to enjoy life and learn about things that may not be comfortable, but it adds to who they are. And it learns, again, even the movie that they banned about The Birth of a Nation, I kind of want to see it. I'm not saying it's going to, why would I want to see it? Am I giving them money? I just want to see it. I want to see what this movie was to understand that this film was mainstream and have these things in it where it was acceptable and only became unacceptable years later. Kind of after people kind of were like, well, it's kind of bad or whatever. I mean, I think it was banned right when it came out, but the fact that it was produced, it was pushing envelopes. So, all right. So I had a whole bunch of other things that I could talk about. I don't want to go all night. This is a great topic. Actually, I didn't go too long. I thought I went longer than night. But I do want to talk about a couple things and wrap kind of the lead, which is like the censorship and the banning of books. Jokes aside, it's to me, you're not only kind of cutting content from folks, but you're actually kind of quelching creativity by proxy, by saying, hey, look, this content or this subject can't be talked about, or this is taboo. So if you read about it or learn about it, or you think about this topic in any way, you can't find any resources on it because we kind of shut it out. We made sure that nobody knows anything about it. That makes no sense. Even as you say it, like when you're thinking about banning books, why don't you just say, hey, look, I want to make sure I know what books my daughter or son gets, or my transitioning whatever, because I'm guessing that that's probably going to be how the only way you're going to learn about it is when somebody in your family goes through it. I hate to say it, and that's unfortunate for a lot of folks, is they don't really kind of relate to something until it happens to them, and then they're like, oh well, now that I understand the issue, it's like, why didn't you understand it when it wasn't happening to you? That's so fucked up, because what does that mean? Like, anything that doesn't happen to you doesn't exist? Yeah, that's kind of what it means. That's kind of a whole ideology, to be honest with you. But all right. So anyway, I'm gonna get off my pedestal. The larger point was I was kind of inspired by Quentin Tarantino's reference to Hays Code. It led me down this rabbit hole of kind of figuring out what that was, which was a code that the MPAA came up to self-regulate, which then evolved into and was kind of discarded for our system that we have today, which is the M, rated M, rated G, rated P, rated PG-13, NC-17X. And then also how that change of lifting those kind of what were considered self-regulating do's and don'ts of making films, you had this explosion of creativity. And you also had an explosion of a whole new genre of films, not only pornography, but all kinds of films. I'm sure that's when slasher films came out and everything else, because now you can do whatever. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre was in the 70s. So it makes sense that you have all this kind of crazy film. I mean, Shaft, you have all these kind of blaxploitation films that came out as well in the 70s that probably could have been made before. And I'm not saying that was a good thing or a bad thing, but as I understand it, these were kind of cultural things that came out of this lifting of this kind of create this code that was stifling people. And again, I found it interesting. I don't know if you find today's little podcast interesting, but hopefully you learned something, because I did. I didn't know what the Hays Code was. I didn't know that there was kind of this change, and I didn't understand, why the 70s were kind of like the heyday of like indie film kind of, and also obviously the movie theaters and everything else that were popular then that were kind of sprung up because of this veil being lifted. I found that very interesting. And so we can kind of take a lesson from history and say, look, perhaps we can have better watching of my parents. Parents want to know what's in the library. You can probably get a list of books and say to your kid, hey, look, these are books I don't want you to get out. And if you say that to your kid, I guarantee they're going to go read those books, but you're going to have to deal with that, because someday the kid's going to have access to those books when you're not around. Like, banning books at your library is just weird. You're not going to ban the books from the world. It's so weird to say, like, here's a place where you go to learn, and we're going to stifle you and say, well, you can't learn about things that, make people uncomfortable. That's just fucked up. I mean, what are we building like with our students? We can argue that another podcast, but let's allow them to think. Let's create a framework where they can look at things in a safe environment and understand it and make things open so that people aren't scared of shit. And shit's not others and them and these things I don't understand. And we got to ban this because I don't fucking get it. It makes no sense. That's going to be it today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Before I close, I am going to say a couple things. So let me take a sip of water. All right, I got to do it. Hold on. Let me do a little fist bump. I just want to say thank you. I really want to say thank you. It's great. I know you've been taking the heat from me. You've been liking the stuff and you've been doing great and supporting me. And I know it's frustrating when I'm spamming the shit out of you. I get it. If you only want to listen to the lives, follow me on YouTube. You won't get shit on YouTube. You get a notification and then you can drop me from Facebook and follow me on YouTube. I'm not trying to push you to my YouTube, but I'd love to have 49 or 50 subscribers. Maybe 2 people that watch this could subscribe. But that's another way where you can just kind of filter me out and just kind of see the lives if that's what you're interested in. And, I foresee that being the place where I can get my channel to be of a higher caliber and people are only watching that really care about it. If you give a shit about the shorts and the other crap that I push, great. And it's not crap. Look, I push things that I care about. I say crap because I understand it feels like that when it's just being thrown in your feed. It's the way things work, and I get it, but I would say to you, your best bet, if you really just want to support me a lot and you're just tired of all the stuff, go follow me on YouTube or TikTok where you just get the content. TikTok's a little bit more spammy, but I'm just doing those things as that's my final resting place, if you will, of my content. So everything on Facebook and Meta is where I'm kind of generating enough engine to go to those platforms. So I know you can say my engine's not working well with YouTube, my being at 48, which I'm not going to argue. A lot of things I got to do to get it improved, to get the quality up. But that's where you're going to get my lives. You'll get a notification. You'll get an email. I think you probably will feel less inclined that I'm just spitting things in your face and blowing a trumpet in your face. So apologies. But again, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody that's been supporting. I do have an interesting guest this week. I'll announce I've got 2 guests, actually. I've got a midweek guest I'm going to be talking with, and then that's a surprise. But he's going to talk about what he's doing locally with the comedy scene. I think I mentioned it, Matt Blank. It's not a surprise. We're going to talk to him. And it's going to be just casual conversation. Just want to know, I'm going to talk to him about my foray into comedy. I'm going to learn about him and ask about, how you grow this community of comedians. So then we also have somebody else on After Hours. Another person who reached out to me is a young gentleman. His name's Ethan Poetic. He changed his name. So we'll talk more about that when that comes up. But anyway, let me just get back to the end and I'll wrap. All right. Don't forget to subscribe, There is a way you can give me stars. Somebody gave me stars for one of the ones where I went off on the local folks, and I'm a little bit embarrassed because I was going to clean that up before I went public, but it blew up, and somebody gave me $10 worth of stars in one fell swoop. I didn't even know I had stars in that way. So you can also contribute stars. I put that right back into this. It's going right back into marketing to blow this up so I can do less spammy shit and hopefully reach out to more folks. But I appreciate all the support, and make sure you tune in Monday through Thursday. After Hours, there'll be 2 After Hours this week since I missed last week. We're doing a soft launch for that, so I'm not pushing hard on a schedule yet. We're just making sure that we do consistent interviews with folks, and we have that outlet where we can learn about other people other than me and my anger and my rage against the machine. That's all I got. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I will see you guys tomorrow night. I think that's it. And we'll end.